Have you heard my PTSD story? I've told my PTSD story about 3 times now, but on Instagram. And I thought I might as well do it over here on YouTube as well, because I feel like YouTube and Instagram are kind of different in that I think YouTube videos last longer, or they're easier to find in future, while Instagram, after a while, they kind of disappear. And also I feel like I have different audiences. Like, do you follow me on Instagram and also YouTube? Let me know below. So over on Instagram, actually, I first shared my story about this on the Mama Circle. That's an account on Instagram. So I did a takeover. It's a private account for moms, but so you can't actually see it unless you you request access. So I decided to retell the story on my Detangled Mind account. I have an account called Detangled Mind on Instagram and also on YouTube, actually, where I share mental health education videos and things that I learned in therapy. And I decided to share it here also because I felt like I might as well. So my name is Sissy. If you're new here, I am a Ugandan psychiatrist trading in the UK. I am also a mom of 3. I am a wife. I am living my best life, to be honest. And I feel like my life got dramatically better after I had therapy. And this is all related to my PTSD story. So the video is titled How I Healed from My Childhood Trauma. And it sounds like there's an end point at which from this day onwards, I have completely healed. And it's not that easy. It's not like if you have malaria, they test and see malaria ++ or 2 pluses. And then one day when you've healed, then your malaria will be negative. So for psychological trauma, it's not that clear cut. It's something they usually like to say is a lifelong journey, like of recovery. But I honestly feel like I healed. That's how I feel anyway. I feel like there's some things obviously here and there will come up. Like, so for instance, just this morning, my husband and I were in the supermarket and it was not our regular shopping time. So we're just passing through. He got something and then I was like, oh, maybe I want this. And then I was like, oh, no, but let me not get it. And then he said, right away, agadiza, which means that why don't you, it's like saying, why don't you like good things for yourself? And that is one of, I think like, it could be like maybe leftover booze things from my childhood traumas, and not specifically the one specific thing, which was actually sexual abuse in childhood, which is going to be what this video is mostly about. But generally speaking, so not maybe giving yourself good things or always doing for others. That's one of the things that I kind of struggle with, but at least I am aware of it and I'm trying to work on it, and I try and intentionally do things for myself now. So anyway, back to the story. So the story is that when I was 3 years old, I was unfortunately sexually abused from the age of about 3 to about 5. And the only reason I know is because I had therapy. And in therapy, I was able to go through like my unprocessed trauma, which was all these memories that were coming back to me. And I was able to also, after a while, talk to my parents and people who were around at the time. And I was able to remember, actually, at the time we were in that house, the way I was describing things, you were 3, like it was 1993. So things can happen a long time ago. And by the time I started having the therapy, I was 30 years old. So 30 years later. So first of all, I would have wanted to set trigger warning, but it's kind of too late. I'm thinking by the time you've watched this video and you've clicked on it, I am hoping that you don't get too triggered, although you probably will if you have a similar history, and I'm sorry for you, and I'm sorry for us, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that, and I just wanted to let you know that it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong in the scenario. It wasn't your fault, and it's very, very common. 1 in 3 women, I think, has experienced sexual violence at some point in their lives. It's a very sad statistic. And currently where I live in the UK, 3 in what is it? It's 1 in 10 children. So that's every 3 in a classroom, because a classroom has 30 kids of children are experiencing sexual abuse. Like that's the statistic, which is very sad. And a friend of mine from India was telling me that over there it's like 1 in 2. So sexual violence against women and girls is something that is very common, and unfortunately is more common than not, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you are a perpetrator of this violence out there, please, do better. So in terms of the PTSD, I feel like personally, because I am a psychiatrist, when I look at the symptoms that I had, I wouldn't actually have said it was PTSD. I feel like I had some of the symptoms, but not everything to say that this is PTSD. Because for you to have a disorder, it has to be affecting you to the point that you cannot function in one of the domains, like either personal, social, occupational, And yeah, I feel like I could still function. So I don't think I had PTSD per se. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter to me. I feel like a diagnosis, especially in psychiatry, is super subjective, and also it's like we kind of count 1, 2, 3. Maybe if you don't have 4 out of 6 symptoms, then it's not PTSD. If you don't have 3 out of this, you see. And yet at the end of the day, for you who is living it, like it doesn't matter if you have 2 or 3. You might have 2 symptoms, but those symptoms are really stressing you out, or they're making your life so much harder. So I feel like it's not really a big issue, but I will make other videos explaining what are the core symptoms of PTSD and also complex PTSD, because at some point I thought maybe it was complex PTSD, but on further reading and research it was not complex PTSD. I don't have complex PTSD, but although I have some symptoms there. Again, I'll make another video with more details about what all these things mean, and if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know below. If you're liking this video up to this point, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps it spread to more people who might need it, who are out there struggling with their childhood traumas and they need help. So in terms of the symptoms that I first had when I was 30 years old, I had just had my second child, and it's the first time I had symptoms of low mood and anxiety. So my mood was starting to become low, I was starting to get depressed. It hadn't gotten to depression, but I was feeling like sad. Life was like not making sense. I was so bored. I was on maternity leave. I was staying home with my baby, and then also those were the days, my baby is a 2020 baby, so it was like 2021 now, but we're still having lockdowns, because by the time I remember I had my daughter, there was a lockdown, and then during my maternity leave there was a lockdown a few times as well, so we couldn't go for playgroup, we couldn't do anything, couldn't go out. Like you could go out a few times, but that was a big factor, I think, that made like my symptoms come up. First of all, being a lockdown situation, reduced social contacts. Number 2 is being postpartum. So when you're postpartum, obviously your hormones are all over the place, and that's going to affect your mood as well. It's like having maybe PMS, all the symptoms you have towards your period. When your hormones like change up, it's going to change your mood. And also people in menopause, also when your hormones are starting going low, that's going to affect your mood as well. So that was happening because I was postpartum. Secondly, I was on a social media break or detox completely. I completely deleted all my social media apps, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which are the ones I was using anyway. And this was because shortly before I had my second baby, I watched a documentary called The Social Dilemma, where they talk about the dangers of social media, how it's so addictive, how it's dragging us all in. And if you've watched it, then you can get really scared. And so for me, at the same time, because of having experienced trauma in the past, I also had a lot of like what are called thinking errors, which are distorted ways of thinking, which are extreme. And one of the ones I struggled with a lot for me was catastrophization, which is worst case scenarios. So when I watched that movie, and already my mind had the tendency to go to worst case scenario, and then I've watched this movie showing me worst case scenarios, and then I applied those scenarios to myself, which is also called like personalization. I applied the scenarios to myself, I imagined the worst, and I deleted all the apps, which is one of the best things that I did actually, and I still do recommend, and I think I need to do it again. So when I deleted these apps, I didn't have any distractions. Secondly, when I first saw a doctor about like how I was feeling, there's an organization called Practitioner Health in the UK. If you're a doctor and you're struggling with your mental health, they can do an assessment, they can offer you talk therapy, and all free of charge, and really much faster than if you got the help through the NHS. So the doctor told me that usually she would not recommend me to go for talk therapy at this point in my life when I have a newborn. So not really a newborn, when I'm postpartum with a 5-month-old baby. I also had a toddler because my older daughter was 2. Usually you're too busy to engage in now talk therapy. But the way I was explaining my life, like for me, for the first time in my life, I was like idle, because all along I always had something to do. Like I was either studying for an exam, studying for an interview, studying. So obviously I was studying from maybe when I went to nursery school when I was 2.5, I was told, baby class. And then I went to primary school, secondary school, university. As soon as I finished my university, I studied internship. And while I was doing internship, I was studying for Canadian exams. After I did that exam, then I applied for all kinds of things. Then I started my MSc. Started an MSc immediately. I had only 1 year out, but in that year I was doing a lot, always searching for scholarships, so busy. I did my MSc. After my MSc here in the UK, I was doing my MSc and I also did my PLAB 1 exam. At the same time, I did my PLAB 2 exam, and then I got a non-training job. But during that exam, I was studying for my MSRA exam, which is the exam that you need to go into specialty training. I started my specialty training, and immediately I started studying for a paper air exam, which is one of the exams that are required in my training. So I was always doing some exam. I was so busy, and if I wasn't doing exams, I was busy with life, and if I wasn't doing that, then I was using a lot of social media. So by the time I decided to delete my apps, I was always online, like if I have free time. But the funny thing is that I was online and not actually using like the apps or posting any content or anything, just looking at postings, just consuming, which is even worse for your mental health. So if you're going to be online, just post. You rather post and tell us what you're doing than to just be there taking in other people's lives. It kind of is worse for your mental health like that. So now I've deleted all my apps. I'm not using anything, and I was really serious this time because I had tried before and failed. And then on top of that, I'm just there. I don't have what to do. And by 5 months time, the baby has kind of gotten a routine whereby they sleep certain times, so you have time, you're just there. I tried watching Sambina Uganda to try and it was like kind of my entertainment, but again, the point is that I had time for the first time in my life by myself there. And finally, the last thing, which was the most precipitating factor, is that I got into an argument with my husband about, I don't even remember, to be honest, I don't remember what it was about, but whatever it was set me off into some catastrophization, worst case scenarios. I started ruminating, like thinking a lot about the same things, going down rabbit holes in my mind and basically depressing myself. So I ended up getting really, really bad in terms of, well, what was bad is that just I felt my mood was really, really low. I was feeling really sad and feeling really anxious. So the anxiety had been a lifelong thing. And by anxiety, I mean it was specifically a constant anxiety, which is called hyperarousal, which is where you're easily startled. So you're constantly in a state of a high alert. So anyone would just startle me. Like, I remember what made me also feel like this is not okay, this is not normal, is that I was in the kitchen and my, I think 3-year-old at that time came in, and then I got shocked. I was like, and I would be in the house and maybe my husband, for if he's going to enter a room and I'm in the room, he had to like give a warning. Like, I'm coming, don't, don't get like scared, like it's just me. And yet we live in the house, just us. So I was constantly on a state of high alert. And I thought it was normal for me. In fact, when I was little, one of the maids that we had, when I was maybe around 9 or 10, one of the maids that we had told me that she said she thinks I have a chicken heart. She used to have a chicken heart, which is that because I was so scared. I was such a scared kid. Like I was constantly like anxious and like scared because obviously I didn't feel safe in my environment. So that's what was happening. So anyway, how I healed from all this is that I was then referred for talking therapy, and the one specifically I had was called trauma-focused CBT. It's not the only one. There are lots of other talking therapy types that can address trauma for like PTSD or generally trauma. I would say you don't need to have PTSD specifically to have therapy to address your traumas. You will know that actually maybe there's something you're not happy about with yourself. Another thing that I remember that my husband was telling me about recently was being more controlling. Like I had a lot of being more controlling, basically is like wanting to control everything, even other people. So wanting to control the way he presents himself, the way he does his things, I'm trying to control him. And then what I was reading about is that sometimes because when you're growing up you felt so helpless and like you cannot control anything when you're a kid, especially if having all this trauma happening to you, then now when you grow up you feel like it's your opportunity, or you try and control everything to the tiniest dot, which is a huge source of anxiety because of course you cannot control everything. So anyway, in the CBT therapy, so CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, where it means that cognitive is your thoughts and behavior is how you behave, and also your emotions. So the way the CBT model works is that you have a thought, and that thought is you're going to interpret that thought in a certain way, and that thought will make you feel a certain emotion, to make you feel sad maybe or happy or whatever, and then that emotion is going to make you behave in a certain way, and then it's a cycle. The behavior usually reinforces certain things. I've done a whole online course actually on emotional regulation and everything that I learned in my own therapy, which I put down because I want to improve it. But if I don't improve it, I may just re-upload it maybe on YouTube. I don't know. I'm not sure, because I don't know if I'll get time to actually, because my plans were to improve it and make it better, but I don't know if I will. I wonder if I should just re-upload it under a section on my YouTube channel. Let me know below what you think. So anyway, I have the sessions of CBT, of trauma focused CBT, which involve what is called reliving the memories. So when you have such traumas, sometimes you have intrusive thoughts or intrusive memories. So I had memories always coming to me when I don't want them, although actually the first time that I actually got this kind of memories, as far as I'm aware, is around the age of maybe 16, 15, around there. Although all this happened when I was like 3 to 5, my mind kind of blocked it out completely. So I completely forgot about it, lived my life. And then when I was older, the memories came back again. And the first person I ever told was my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. He's the first person I felt safe enough to tell. And after that, then I did tell other people. I remember telling a friend. And then after that, I'll tell another person, like when appropriate, not just randomly. Like I'll just feel like maybe it's appropriate to tell this person, or I feel like safe with this person, I'll tell them. I would encourage you to also do the same, because the more you keep the thing in your mind, the more it eats away at you. So having told, every time I told people, I felt better, and then I also felt like maybe I'm okay now. That's what I thought anyway. I thought that I'm fine. I mean, I can now talk about it without overly crying, which is not, by the way, always an entirely good sign. Sometimes you can talk about something and you're not crying, but it's because you've actually separated your emotions from the event, and you're talking about it like as if you're talking about someone else's life. So anyway, for me, there was that phase of completely forgetting. And then with time, I would have the memories every now and then, but every time they come, I want to push them away. So that's what's called intrusive thoughts, that you want the thoughts to go away. But the thing is, the more you try and push them, the more they stay. And because I am a psychiatrist, I work in psychiatry, and a lot of times, well, every time, especially if I'm seeing a new patient, I have to ask them about how was their childhood, did they have any abuse, did they have any sexual abuse, did they have any, it's like a common question I have to ask everyone. And I was constantly afraid that what if this triggers me so much? What if, like, I knew I was not entirely together. I just had that feeling that what if something happens and I am unraveled? So now I don't have that feeling, because I know I have gone through it, I have processed that trauma. So that's one of the signs of unprocessed trauma, is that you're just afraid of what's going to happen if you think about it, or, So anyway, I then had my talking therapy, in which we did the reliving. So you have to talk about everything that happened, the way you remember it, and try and go back in that moment. So my sessions were all virtual. My therapist, it was virtual, which worked for me anyway. And so it was by Zoom call, and we recorded the call. And then he told me to then go and watch it. So I had to watch it as many times as possible to then get past that feeling of now every time I'm crying. And then I understood the feelings and the thoughts that I was having as an adult. So a lot of times you also have a lot of feelings of shame, guilt, which are misplaced, because you shouldn't be feeling shame or guilt because you haven't done anything wrong, and it's someone else who done something wrong in the scenario. But I did have those feelings as well. And I remember I used to wonder why I never told anyone, but I found out through the therapy, we discussed and realized that actually I was a kid. Of course, I'm not going to tell anyone if I think I've done something wrong. So maybe the person told me something to maybe scare me. I don't know, because again, I can't remember 100% all the details. But there's that. And also the environment around me. Perhaps the environment wasn't that supportive. I didn't feel safe enough to tell anyone that. Actually, I did tell someone when I was little, but it was another kid. Because back then, we were living in multi-family households. So you're lots of families, lots of relatives, lots of people. So that's what happens, is that, and back in those days, they'll just leave kids anyhow. Like, they just leave them, they don't even care. I don't know about now in Uganda, but I know that back then. So I did have a conversation with my parents as well. I asked my therapist, and we made a plan of how we're going to talk about it. Because if you go I wouldn't recommend to just go to talk to people who you think maybe have a role to play in your trauma and you haven't prepared yourself, because you just go there, and if you're anything like me, it will just end in tears. It will just end in tears, people get defensive. So anyway, I had a conversation with them, and that's how I was able to, first of all, because I'm trying to reorganize my memories. So what happens in the trauma-focused CBT is that you try to remember all your memories, because if you don't remember the memories, it becomes like if the analogy the therapist uses that if there's a cupboard, let's say, that has in disorganized clothes, and you have invited people around, and then you just stuff them into the cupboard, you just stuff them in like without organizing them, and any moment it's going to burst open. But then people come in, you have visitors, but every time you're checking to see, has the cupboard opened, has it not? So it's distracting you from living your current life now. That's how those intrusive memories are as well. Is that every time you're thinking, have you forgotten, have you not? So the role of the therapist to take out all the mess, look at it, organize it, and then put it back neatly. And that's exactly what happened. Is that I feel like I understood all the memories. I even now talk to my parents and ask them, why were you living with this people? Because the little, like my inner child, who is a little girl in me, who was facing all these traumas, all these horrible things, she deserved answers. So she wanted to know, where were all the adults? What was happening? Where was it not safe? Where was I being left? Not just me, but where were we all just being left there to our own devices, all the kids all together, meanwhile, all ages. So even from 3-year-olds to young ones to then like 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, that was the problem. So like these older ones are the ones taking care of us, but then no one is supervising. So anyway, I talked to the parents and I found out a lot of things that helped me to piece my memories as well together. And I listened to their side of the story, because for them back then, it was acceptable to just leave your kids and like as long as they're safe, you think they're safe anyway, they're eating. There wasn't as much awareness about this sexual abuse stuff. But these days, I think there is, and I have a feeling it's because a lot of us in this generation of mine maybe experienced this, so now we are alert. And we might even be hyper, which is also a negative thing, by the way, where you overly, and then that's how it becomes generational trauma, where you pass on your traumas and maybe your fears, maybe for like sex and what, onto your kids. So beware, people. That's also a danger. So anyway, yes, I had the sessions of therapy and it was life-changing, amazing, and that's when I started sharing even more on my on social media, because then I realized that I had been catastrophizing worst case scenario about social media. I wasn't looking at the positives, I wasn't making a balanced decision. So I went back on, but this time I decided to be more active. I decided if I'm going to be here, I'll try and actually make content and not only consume the content that is out there. And I created my Detangled Mind account. And yeah, went back to work. And the best part for me is that when I went back to work, the first patient I ever saw had PTSD, which felt like such a full circle moment, because it's like, wow. Like I couldn't tell the person, but I felt like, you know, like I've done it, I can do this. It gave me even more confidence that actually I've been through this, so I can help you through it as well. So yeah, that's why I even got interested in talking therapy as well, because as a psychiatrist, most psychiatrists would not also be doing talking therapy unless you do medical psychotherapy. And I'm looking for more and more training, really, for more talking therapy, because I feel like it's so life-changing. So for me, in my scenario, for instance, they did offer me medication, but at that time, I felt like it wasn't that bad for me to require medication. But you might be somewhere where I actually need medication. So for instance, if your anxiety is so high that you can't even concentrate, or you can't even sleep, or you can't even, like, your appetite has gone, you're not even eating, you can't start now going to talk about it. You need to first lower the anxiety levels a bit, or what if, in case you're like really depressed as well, lift your mood a bit. So there's a role for medication. And for me, I just didn't need it. But then also, I feel like the therapy is really, really important as well, because while the medication will help you to a certain point, the therapy is going to help you to another point as well, like to help you to understand yourself, understand other people. And yeah, so that is my story. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to watch another video in which I talk about a time when my life really sucked and how it turned around, then watch this video next.